John Coy from Swinburne Uni. Hi. Australia has lived off the sheep's back for a number of years, or you certainly used to, where we'd sell our wool to Italy and buy the very expensive suit, very low value for the country. Now we're doing the same for the resource industry. So how do you see us changing the economic behaviour and build a talent mindset?
Well, if there was a very simple answer that I could do in 30 seconds, you would have got it. Firstly, there are two issues around that. The first one is it's very complex, but you don't have a choice. You have to do it. I think that's the issue. Now, don't be unrealistic about this. There's no way you're going to replace Caterpillar in the mining supply chain, right? And you're not necessarily going to do a lot of added value to those minerals. They have set systems. They go to other places. But there are other things. For example, you already now have an exceedingly rapidly growing mining equipment industry, which is doing very, very well. That has come up spontaneously because there is an opportunity. And what it may need is a little bit of supporting competence, support, and a few other things. But it's doing the job in that sense. So I think it is happening with our opportunities. I think the biggest thing you can do is to create an awareness among people in general and managers specifically of the requirement to change and to add value. If you do that, you're fine. And the reason is that you have been able to get away with being lazy. It was very easy to live in Australia. I could have my cows grazing out there extensively. I'd have something milking them, and I'd bring it back in, and the cheapest thing I could do was skim milk powder, and I shot it off at the world market, and I was competitive because I had a very low-cost environment. Right? So I didn't need to worry. And I could relax and have a generally good life. Right? In Finland, I sit on the scientific advisory board of one of the very few research-based dairies in the world. There is not a worse country in the world cost-wise to produce milk in. You have to have insulated buildings for the cows. They have to be indoors and be loved and given all kinds of supplementary and complementary foods for 3/4 of the year. Right? And then the 1 quarter they're out, there is interesting things, and they have to be taken care of and protected from bears and other useful things. It's extremely difficult. And then you have some inefficient collection mechanism for the milk, which cost a fortune to bring in. In spite of this dairy is incredibly profitable because it's research-based. You go out in the shops here and you buy anything that contains functional food from that point, LG or whatever it is, you will find this license from that place. They either sell or license to 123 countries in the world, and it is not skim milk powder. Right? It is high value added, technology-based things that nobody else can do. Right? So it is this issue about your choice, and you have had the choice. Now you no longer have the choice. That's the issue.
All right. As a favour, David, I'll let you ask the last question.
Okay. Hi, David Lawson from Compumedics. We actually do manufacture high-end medical devices here in Melbourne and
very good.
To the world. My question is around, and I should actually validate that cash flow is what I do look at, not profitability, particularly when we're investing 15% of the revenues in R&D.
Yeah.
My question to you is around closeness to customers.
Yeah.
And as an Australian company growing up in this market, because most of your high-value markets for what we do are in America and Europe and Asia, and therefore we have to do our growing up as an exporter. We don't get to do our growing up as a domestic company like an equivalent American or European company would. So we make a lot of mistakes on the international stage rather than in our home market. And do you see that as an issue for Australia as it tries to evolve itself into a high-value manufacturer out of a resources boom? And if so, should the government be doing anything about that?
A couple of things in your question. First line, congratulations on having a firm that sits in the top right-hand corner of my little matrix. Very good. Constant struggle, but as long as you stay there, you're doing all right. Yeah. The issue here is that what you are alluding to used to be a bigger problem historically than it is now. We have an increasing growing share of what's known as born global companies. Companies who start up and their first customer is on the other side of the world. Right? So we have that. Now, the interesting thing with those companies is that unless they spread their customers, the end result, the moment they get owned by a rational owner, is migration of the firm to be close to your key customer. As long as you're privately held by a family or an individual which is socially embedded, they will not take the rational decision, so they will stay, right? So that's the classical issue. So one of the things that government can do is to encourage firms to be privately held rather than be divested early.
We're publicly listed.
Yeah. So there is a high risk that I would assume that you on a regular basis have discussions whether you should stay or not in Australia.
Very much so.
Yes,
Very
absolutely. That follows from exactly that statement of being, publicly listed. And one of the issues around that is that that's the rational thing to do. You are maximizing shareholder returns and all these things. As a privately held firm, you are not rational in that sense. Your rationality is otherwise interesting, so you will stay. So the first thing, if you, in a country like Australia and also in Scandinavia, which we do, a lot of born globals in Scandinavia start by selling to North America or to China, right? So it's about the same distance as you have. The issue then is that we want them to be family owned, because if they're family owned, they stay. That's number one. Number two is that to assist these firms to grow, the government has huge power. Normally of any budget, at least 15% or so is spent on procurement of any public sector activity. And that is a huge tool to grow firms. And the Americans are experts on this. They have something called the SBIR program, which has been used to create firms that are very successful. And it is around smart procurement in that sense. So smart procurement you use for a tiny bit of your procurement money. Most is just buying loo rolls and stuff like that. You go ahead and buy them in whatever way you want. But for certain things which have an industrial impact, you either allow the firms to do these things with an SPRR program where you buy prototypes and then enable the firm to have a proof of concept, building capacity, and then getting a reference so they go on from there. Or you force them up by asking for things that are not off the shelf and from a moment nobody makes. So you drive up the capability in the industry and you buy on life cycle cost, not on purchase price. All of which, by the way, completely agree to in WTO. And life cycle cost always benefits geographical proximity of the seller. So there are a number of tools the government can use. None of them really incurs any expense, right? But it would dramatically do this. So there's certain type of policies. But it is not about export subsidies. It is not about trying to control the exchange rate. It's about very small demand side tools that facilitates the environment in which you have the opportunity to grow successfully, get off the ground, and also where we can encourage you to retain a lot of your economic value creating activities in Australia rather than migrate to your largest customer in the US. Yeah, that's it.
Okay, I think on that note we'll draw on into the question time. I'd now like to invite Julia Page, CEO of VESKI, to offer the vote of thanks.